The sodium-yellow glow of streetlights cast long shadows across the empty parking lot as Jessica Mercer locked up the diner where she worked. It was just after midnight, October 17th, 2000. A light autumn rain had begun to fall, drumming softly against the roof of her blue Honda Civic as she slid into the driver's seat. 28 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that carried both exhaustion and determination, Jessica was known for her punctuality and reliability. "See you tomorrow, Jess," called her coworker, waving from beneath an umbrella. "Bright and early," Jessica replied with a tired smile, starting her car. She turned on the radio, local station playing something soft and acoustic, and pulled onto the quiet Bloomington streets. The dashboard clock read 12:14 a.m. Her babysitter would be waiting, probably half asleep on the couch, television murmuring in the background. Her 4-year-old daughter Lily would be curled up in bed, clutching the stuffed rabbit Jessica had sewn herself. Jessica never made it home that night. The babysitter called the police at 1:30 a.m. By sunrise, Jessica Mercer's name was being broadcast on local news. By sunset, her photograph, smiling, hopeful, alive, was taped to storefront windows and telephone poles throughout Monroe County. Her car was missing. Her purse was missing. Her keys, her wallet, her life, vanished. And for 25 long years her case would sit in a filing cabinet labeled unsolved, collecting dust while her daughter grew up without a mother and a killer walked free. What you're about to hear isn't just another crime story. It's a testament to relentless determination, to the bonds of family that refuse to be broken by time or tragedy, and to the advancing technology that finally brought justice after a quarter-century of questions. Before we dive deeper into this remarkable case, take a second to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Cold cases like Jessica's are being solved every day thanks to new technology and dedicated investigators, and you won't want to miss our coverage of these breakthrough moments in criminal justice. Your subscription helps us continue telling these important stories of long-awaited justice. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below. I'm always fascinated to see how far these stories of justice reach. Bloomington, Indiana in the year 2000 was a place of contrasts. Home to Indiana University, it balanced small-town Midwestern charm with the vibrant energy of a college community. Violent crime was rare enough that when it happened, it shattered the community's sense of security. People knew their neighbors. They left doors unlocked. They trusted. When Jessica Mercer disappeared, that trust fractured. Parents began escorting their children to bus stops. Women started carrying pepper spray. College students traveled in groups after dark. The disappearance of a young single mother, someone just trying to make ends meet, working late shifts to provide for her daughter, struck at the heart of what made people feel vulnerable. Local police were baffled. No body was found. No crime scene was identified. Jessica's car had seemingly evaporated along with her. The only certainties were a missing mother, a daughter left behind, and the gut-wrenching questions that hung in the air like smoke. Who would want to harm Jessica Mercer? Where was she taken? Was she still alive somewhere? Or had something unimaginable happened on those rain-slicked Bloomington streets? As days turned to weeks, hope dimmed. As weeks turned to months, the case grew colder. As months stretched into years, many forgot. But two women never stopped searching for the truth. Jessica's mother, Eleanor, and her sister Rachel. And in 2025, 25 years after that rainy October night, their persistence would finally pay off in a way that would leave an entire community reeling with shock. Jessica Ann Mercer was born in Bloomington, Indiana on March 12, 1972, to Eleanor and Robert Mercer. Growing up on the east side of town in a modest two-bedroom home with her younger sister Rachel, Jessica was known for her practical nature and quiet determination. Former classmates from Bloomington High School North remembered her as intelligent but reserved, a young woman who preferred the company of books to parties. She graduated in 1990 with honors, but turned down college scholarships to care for her father who had been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. Jessica always put others first, Eleanor Mercer would later tell reporters. Even as a teenager, She had this sense of responsibility that most adults never develop. After her father passed away in 1992, Jessica worked a series of retail jobs to help her mother with finances. It was during her time as a cashier at Walden Books that she met Dustin Harmon, a graduate student studying literature at Indiana University. Their whirlwind romance led to marriage in 1994, and their daughter Lily was born in 1996. The marriage began dissolving almost immediately after. Friends reported that Dustin had expected Jessica to support his academic ambitions while raising their daughter, but he showed little interest in contributing financially or emotionally to their family. Court records revealed a contentious divorce in 1998, with Jessica fighting for full custody of 2-year-old Lily, while Dustin threatened to relocate to Chicago for a teaching position. He wanted to punish her for ending the marriage, Rachel Mercer explained. He never actually wanted custody of Lily. He just couldn't stand that Jessica had made a decision without him. Jessica won primary custody, but the legal battles drained her savings. By 2000, she was working 2 jobs, as a receptionist at a local dental office during the day, and as a waitress at Mabel's Diner 3 evenings a week. According to co-workers, she rarely complained, despite the exhausting schedule. 6 months before her disappearance, Jessica had begun dating Michael Lawson, a mechanic at the auto shop where she took her aging Honda for repairs. Michael, described by acquaintances as rough around the edges but good-hearted, had a minor criminal record, a DUI from 1995 and a disorderly conduct charge that was later dismissed. Their relationship progressed quickly, with Michael often watching Lily when Jessica worked evening shifts. She seemed happier those last few months, said Diane Kemp, Jessica's supervisor at the dental office. She was talking about going back to school, maybe studying nursing. She finally seemed to be looking toward the future, instead of just surviving day to day. On October 16, 2000, the day before she vanished, Jessica's life followed its normal routine. She dropped Lily at preschool at 8:15 a.m., worked at the dental office until 4:30 p.m., picked up her daughter, and made dinner at their small apartment on South Rogers Street. At 6:45 p.m., Amber Wilson, a 19-year-old neighbor and regular babysitter, arrived to watch Lily while Jessica worked her shift at Mabel's Diner. According to Amber's later police statement, Jessica seemed distracted that evening. She checked her cell phone a couple times before leaving, which wasn't like her. When I asked if everything was okay, she just said she was tired and might pick up an extra shift that weekend. Security footage from Mabel's Diner showed Jessica arriving for her 7 p.m. shift. She served customers, collected tips, and according to her manager, received a phone call around 10:30 p.m. that seemed to upset her. She asked for a 5-minute break after that, the manager reported. When she came back, she was quieter than usual, but she finished her shift professionally. Jessica clocked out at 12:06 a.m. on October 17th. The security camera caught her walking to her car, looking over her shoulder twice before getting in. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Jessica Mercer. When she failed to return home by 1:30 a.m., Amber Wilson grew concerned. The drive from Mabel's to Jessica's apartment typically took no more than 15 minutes. After calling Jessica's cell phone repeatedly with no answer, Amber called the police at 1:47 a.m. to report Jessica missing. Officer Thomas Reynolds responded to the call, arriving at Jessica's apartment at 2:12 a.m. His initial report noted that while Jessica's absence was concerning, adults missing for less than 24 hours rarely warranted immediate investigation. Nevertheless, he took basic information and promised to circulate her description and vehicle details to patrol officers. Amber then called Eleanor Mercer, who arrived at the apartment within 30 minutes, taking over childcare for a sleeping Lily. By sunrise, Eleanor and Rachel had begun calling hospitals, Jessica's friends, and even her ex-husband Dustin, who claimed to be at a literary conference in Indianapolis. As morning progressed without word from Jessica, Eleanor insisted on filing a formal missing person report. Detective Sarah Monahan was assigned to the case and, noting Jessica's reliable history and the unusual circumstances, leaving her child with a babysitter overnight without communication, upgraded the case to a potential abduction by mid-afternoon. "We knew something was wrong immediately," Rachel Mercer later told the media. "Jessica wouldn't leave Lily. Not ever. Not for anything. When she didn't call the babysitter, didn't answer her phone, we knew someone had taken her." The community response was immediate and overwhelming. By October 18th, over 200 volunteers had organized search parties, combing wooded areas around Bloomington and distributing flyers with Jessica's photograph. Local businesses donated resources, including a print shop that produced thousands of missing person posters and a pizza restaurant that fed volunteers. The police faced immediate obstacles that hampered the investigation. Jessica's blue Honda Civic was missing, with no trace of it on traffic cameras leaving Bloomington. Her cell phone records showed her last call was received at 10:31 p.m. on October 16th, from a payphone that could not be traced. The rain on the night she disappeared had washed away potential evidence from the diner parking lot. Detective Monahan focused initial attention on Jessica's ex-husband Dustin and her boyfriend Michael. Both men provided alibis. Dustin claimed to be at his conference with colleagues who corroborated his presence, while Michael stated he had been at home watching television, though he had no witnesses to verify this. "We had a missing woman, a missing car, and very little else to go on," Detective Monahan would later reflect. "In most cases, we have a crime scene. We have physical evidence. Here we had nothing but questions." Police searched Jessica's apartment but found no signs of planned departure. Her passport was in a drawer, clothes hung neatly in closets, and a grocery list for the coming week was magneted to her refrigerator. Her bank accounts showed no unusual withdrawals, and her credit cards remained unused after her disappearance. For Eleanor and Rachel Mercer, the first week after Jessica vanished was a blur of police interviews, organizing searches, and caring for 4-year-old Lily, who couldn't understand where her mother had gone. "How do you explain to a child that her mother is missing?" Eleanor recounted years later, her voice breaking. "How do you answer when she asks if mommy doesn't love her anymore? Those first days were... There aren't words for that kind of pain." Rachel took a leave of absence from her teaching job to move in with her mother and niece. "We had to keep functioning," she explained, "for Lily. But it felt like we were moving underwater, like everything was happening in slow motion. We'd catch ourselves holding our breath whenever the phone rang." As days stretched into weeks without leads, the initial surge of community support began to fade. Search parties grew smaller, media coverage decreased, police resources were gradually reallocated to other cases. But Eleanor and Rachel Mercer continued putting up new flyers each weekend, checking in with detectives daily, and promising Lily that they would never stop looking for her mother. The not knowing was the worst part, Rachel would later tell a documentary crew. "If we had found her body, at least we could have grieved. Instead, we lived in this terrible limbo, hoping Jessica was alive somewhere but fearing what she might be enduring if she was." By Christmas of 2000, Jessica Mercer's case had gone from front-page news to a brief mention in the year's Unsolved Crimes Roundup. For most of Bloomington, life returned to normal. For the Mercer family, normal would never exist again. As the first 72 hours after Jessica's disappearance passed, the critical window in missing persons cases, the Bloomington Police Department expanded their investigation, assigning 3 additional detectives to work alongside Detective Sarah Monahan. The team established a dedicated command center in a conference room at police headquarters, where photographs of Jessica, maps of Bloomington with search areas marked, and timelines of her last known movements covered the walls. The investigation naturally gravitated toward the 2 men closest to Jessica, her ex-husband Dustin Harmon and her boyfriend Michael Lawson. Dustin Harmon presented himself as the consummate academic, articulate, measured, and seemingly cooperative. At 33, he had recently secured a tenure-track position in the English department at Indiana University after years of adjunct work and graduate studies. His colleagues described him as brilliant but cold, a man who cultivated an air of intellectual superiority. He spoke about Jessica as if she were a character in one of his literary analyses, Detective Monahan noted in her case files. Detached, clinical, discussing their relationship in terms of narrative arcs and inevitable conclusions, rather than emotions. The investigation into Dustin's background revealed a pattern of controlling behavior during their marriage. Financial records showed he had maintained exclusive access to their joint accounts despite his minimal contributions. Emails recovered from Jessica's computer contained lengthy critiques of her parenting, appearance, and intelligence. Perhaps most disturbing was a letter found in Jessica's personal files, in which Dustin threatened to use his connections in academic circles to ensure she would never be accepted into any college program if she pursued full custody of Lily. He weaponized her insecurities, Rachel Mercer explained to investigators. Jessica dropped out of college to care for our dying father. Dustin constantly reminded her that she was just a high school graduate while he had his master's degree. He made her feel like she was lucky he had chosen her. Despite these concerning patterns, Dustin's alibi for the night of Jessica's disappearance appeared solid. Conference attendance records showed he had checked in at the Literature Symposium in Indianapolis at 7 p.m. on October 16th. Hotel security footage confirmed he entered his room at 11:37 p.m. and did not leave until 8:15 a.m. the following morning. The drive from Indianapolis to Bloomington took approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes, making it seemingly impossible for him to have been involved in Jessica's disappearance around midnight. We couldn't break his alibi, Detective Monahan later admitted, but something about him never sat right. He seemed almost pleased by the attention the case brought him. Michael Lawson presented a stark contrast to Dustin's polished academic persona. At 34, with calloused hands and plain speech, Lawson had worked as an auto mechanic since dropping out of high school. His small apartment above the garage where he worked was sparsely furnished but meticulously clean. While his minor criminal record initially raised red flags, colleagues at the auto shop described him as hardworking and honest. "Mike's the guy who stays late to finish a job without charging extra," his employer told police. "He's rough around the edges, sure, but he's got a good heart." When interviewed, Lawson was visibly distraught, often pausing to collect himself. "She was turning things around," he told detectives, voice breaking. "We talked about getting a house together someday, something with a yard for Lily. Jessica deserved that." However, Lawson's alibi proved problematic. He claimed to have been home alone watching a Monday night football game after Jessica left for work. Phone records showed he called her cell phone at 10:31 p.m., the call that witnesses at the diner described as upsetting her. Lawson insisted he had only called to tell her goodnight, a routine they had established. "I told her I loved her," he stated during his third interview. "That's the last thing I ever said to her." With no witnesses to corroborate his whereabouts between 10:31 p.m. and when police questioned him at 5:20 a.m. the following morning, Lawson remained a person of interest. Yet searches of his apartment, workplace, and vehicle revealed no evidence connecting him to Jessica's disappearance. The investigation expanded to include other possibilities: a random abduction, a customer from the diner with an unhealthy fixation, even the theory that Jessica had staged her own disappearance to escape ongoing conflicts with her ex-husband. Each potential lead was pursued exhaustively, only to end in frustration. Search teams focused on abandoned properties, wooded areas, and waterways within a 30-mile radius of Bloomington. Divers examined quarries, dangerous swimming holes scattered throughout the region. Cadaver dogs searched remote areas off hiking trails. Volunteers walked in grid patterns through cornfields and forests. The missing blue Honda Civic became the subject of a multi-state bulletin. None of these efforts yielded results. The forensic limitations of 2000 presented significant obstacles for investigators. DNA analysis, while available, was slow and expensive, typically reserved for homicide cases with physical evidence. Without a crime scene or recovered DNA samples, such testing wasn't applicable. Cell phone tracking technology existed, but was primitive compared to today's capabilities, providing only general location data based on tower connections rather than precise GPS coordinates. "We could tell her phone last pinged near the diner," explained former Bloomington Police Chief Walter Davis in a 2023 interview. "But that only told us what we already knew, that she'd been at work. Once the phone was turned off or the battery died, we had no way to track it." Surveillance cameras in 2000 were limited and scattered. The grainy footage from Mabel's diner's security system showed Jessica leaving but couldn't capture license plates of other vehicles or clear images of faces beyond the immediate entrance. Only 3 traffic cameras existed in Bloomington at that time, none positioned to have captured Jessica's route home. Digital forensics was in its infancy. While investigators examined Jessica's home computer, the processing power and software available to local police departments couldn't recover deleted files or analyze browsing patterns with the precision possible today. Social media platforms that might have provided insights into Jessica's relationships or state of mind didn't yet exist in their current form. We were working with stone knives and bearskins compared to what investigators have today, Detective Monahan reflected. We did everything possible with what we had, but those technological limitations haunt me when I think about what we might have missed. As winter descended on Bloomington, the case grew as cold as the landscape. December brought heavy snowfall that effectively halted outdoor searches, burying potential evidence under inches of ice and frozen ground. What's the weather like where you are today? Our story takes place during a harsh Indiana winter, where temperatures plunged to single digits and snow drifted against the search party's cars. A bitter metaphor for the increasingly frozen case. The public response to Jessica's disappearance evolved as weeks passed. Initial shock and solidarity gave way to theories and speculation. Anonymous tips flooded the police hotline, most leading nowhere but consuming valuable investigative resources. Local media coverage began incorporating sensationalized elements, with one newspaper running the headline, "Mother Vanishes, Scandalous Love Triangle," despite no evidence supporting such a narrative. Internet message boards, primitive by today's standards, became gathering places for amateur sleuths who analyzed and reanalyzed the limited public information. Some of these discussions turned accusatory, with unfounded allegations against both Dustin Harmon and Michael Lawson circulating widely. People wanted answers so badly they started creating their own, Rachel Mercer said. They couldn't accept that sometimes things happen that don't make sense, that can't be wrapped up neatly. Yet amid the rumors and diminishing official resources, a core group of community members remained steadfast in their support. Jessica's former co-workers established a trust fund for Lily's education. Neighbors organized meal deliveries to Eleanor Mercer's home. A local printing company continued producing missing person flyers free of charge. As 2000 drew to a close, the official investigation remained active but increasingly symbolic. Without new evidence, investigators could only re-examine existing statements and hope for a breakthrough that seemed increasingly unlikely to come. By March 2001, 6 months after Jessica Mercer's disappearance, the daily briefings at the Bloomington Police Department had dwindled to weekly updates. By summer, they became monthly status reports with increasingly little to report. The designated conference room, once buzzing with activity and purpose, was gradually stripped of its maps and timelines to make space for other pressing cases. Detective Sarah Monahan, who had once led a team of 4 investigators, found herself working the case alone during whatever hours she could spare from new assignments. The transition wasn't announced officially. It simply happened, the way cold cases always do. Not with a definitive closure, but with the quiet redistribution of resources. There's this misconception that investigators stop caring, Monahan explained years later. We never stop caring. But without new evidence, without witnesses coming forward, without a crime scene or a body, we reach a point where we've exhausted every available avenue. The investigation stalled for multiple interconnected reasons. First and most significant was the complete absence of physical evidence. Without Jessica's body or her vehicle, forensic analysis remained impossible. The rain on the night of her disappearance had washed away any potential evidence from the diner parking lot, and the seasonal changes of an Indiana fall, leaves dropping, winds gusting, temperatures fluctuating, had likely destroyed any outdoor evidence that might have existed. Second, both primary persons of interest, Dustin Harmon and Michael Lawson, had been thoroughly investigated without yielding actionable evidence. Dustin's alibi remained unbroken despite repeated scrutiny. Michael, despite lacking a verifiable alibi, had cooperated fully with multiple searches of his residence and workplace. Without evidence linking either man to Jessica's disappearance, the legal threshold for arrest or even search warrants for additional properties couldn't be met. Third, the thousands of tips received had led to dead ends, consuming valuable investigative hours without results. Each required documentation, follow-up, and eventual elimination, creating mountains of paperwork but no breakthroughs. Fourth, jurisdictional complexities created procedural hurdles. Without knowing where Jessica might have been taken, or even if she had left Bloomington voluntarily, it was unclear which agencies should be involved. While her information was entered into national databases for missing persons, the case remained primarily with the Bloomington Police Department, limiting the resources available. Finally, the technological limitations of the early 2000s created barriers that seemed insurmountable. Digital forensics was rudimentary, DNA analysis was expensive and slow, and the interconnected systems that allowed today's investigators to quickly cross-reference information across databases simply didn't exist. We were stuck in an investigative limbo, Chief Davis admitted in a later interview. Too many unknowns, too few resources, and a case that grew colder with each passing day. By the one-year anniversary of Jessica's disappearance in October 2001, media coverage had transformed dramatically. What had once been front-page news with daily updates had become an occasional human interest story, typically framed around milestone dates or Eleanor and Rachel Mercer's continued search efforts. Local television stations, which had once sent reporters to daily police briefings, now produced periodic cold case segments featuring Jessica's story alongside others, brief reminders of unsolved mysteries rather than ongoing news coverage. These segments grew shorter and less frequent as years passed, eventually appearing only during anniversary months or when the family organized public events. Print media followed a similar pattern. The daily articles became weekly, then monthly, then yearly. Journalists who had once been dedicated to Jessica's case were reassigned to other beats. New reporters who picked up anniversary stories lacked the detailed knowledge of the case, often rehashing basic facts without the nuance or context that might have kept public interest engaged. The September 11, 2001, terrorist attacks marked a particular turning point in media attention. As national tragedy dominated headlines, local cases like Jessica's were pushed further from public consciousness. When coverage did occur, it increasingly took on a nostalgic tone. Do you remember? Headlines rather than breaking news, treating her disappearance as a historical event rather than an ongoing investigation. Social attention mirrored media patterns. The volunteer search parties that had once numbered in the hundreds dwindled to dozens, then to just family and close friends. Tip lines that had once been staffed around the clock were reduced to voicemail systems checked periodically. Posters featuring Jessica's face, once ubiquitous throughout Bloomington, weathered, faded, and were rarely replaced except by Eleanor and Rachel themselves. "It's like watching someone die twice," Eleanor Mercer told a reporter on the third anniversary of her daughter's disappearance. First Jessica vanishes and then her memory starts to fade from public consciousness. People move on. They forget. But we can't forget. We won't. For Jessica's family, the transition of her case from active investigation to cold case status was devastating on multiple levels. Beyond the agonizing reality that their loved one remained missing, they now faced the additional burden of keeping her case alive in both official channels and public awareness. Eleanor, who had taken early retirement from her nursing career to care for Lily full-time, dedicated her life to two purposes: raising her granddaughter and finding her daughter. She converted the dining room of her small house into what she called Jessica's war room, a space where she meticulously organized case files, photographs, timelines, and correspondence with law enforcement. "Mom became an amateur detective," Rachel explained. "She read every book on investigation she could find. She learned legal terminology. She studied similar cases and their resolutions. She transformed herself into an advocate not just for Jessica, but for all missing persons." Rachel, meanwhile, balanced her teaching career with what became an unofficial role as the family's public representative. She maintained relationships with journalists, organized annual awareness events, and eventually created a website dedicated to Jessica's case, updating it regularly with any developments, however small, and connecting with families of other missing persons who offered support and guidance. Perhaps most painful for both women was navigating Lily's growing understanding of her mother's absence. The little girl who had once asked simple questions, "When is Mommy coming home?" grew into an adolescent seeking more complex answers. By her 10th birthday, Lily was old enough to understand the harsh reality that her mother might never return. By 15, she was joining her grandmother and aunt at awareness events, her face a haunting echo of the woman on the missing person posters. "We promised Lily we would never lie to her about Jessica," Eleanor said. "But we also promised we would never give up hope. Those promises sometimes conflict, especially as years pass. How do you maintain hope without denying reality?" Jessica Mercer's case reflected a troubling pattern evident in missing persons investigations nationwide. According to FBI statistics from that period, approximately 800,000 people were reported missing annually in the United States. While the majority were located safely, thousands remained missing long-term, their cases eventually going cold, despite initial intensive investigations. Statistics revealed uncomfortable truths. Cases involving white women typically received more media attention and investigative resources than those involving people of color. Cases with obvious signs of foul play often progressed further than mysterious disappearances like Jessica's, where the absence of a crime scene created investigative barriers. And cases in smaller jurisdictions like Bloomington frequently suffered from resource limitations that their big city counterparts might overcome through specialized units and advanced technology. Jessica's case wasn't unique in going cold, explained Dr. Harold Renfrew, a criminologist who studied investigative patterns in missing persons cases. What made it stand out was her family's extraordinary persistence in keeping it alive against overwhelming odds. If you've stayed with us this far in Jessica's story, you understand something profound about persistence. Eleanor and Rachel Mercer never gave up searching for answers, even when it seemed the whole world had moved on. Their determination reminds us that some bonds can't be broken by time or circumstance. Hit that subscribe button now to join our community, dedicated to bringing attention to cold cases like Jessica's. Your support helps ensure these stories aren't forgotten, and might even help bring resolution to families still waiting for answers. Have you ever known someone who showed this kind of unwavering commitment to a cause? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As the calendar pages turned from 2001 to 2002, then onward through years of birthdays Jessica never celebrated, holidays she never shared, and milestones in Lily's life she never witnessed, the official classification of her disappearance shifted from active investigation to cold case, a bureaucratic designation that acknowledged the painful reality faced by thousands of families across America each year. A reality where questions outweigh answers, where hope battles against probability, and where those left behind must learn to live with uncertainty that feels like an open wound that cannot heal. But cold cases share another characteristic. They're never truly closed. And sometimes, years later, when technology advances or memories shift or conscience weighs too heavy, the truth finds its way to the surface. As Jessica Mercer's case retreated from headlines and police priority lists, Eleanor and Rachel Mercer underwent a transformation that neither woman had ever anticipated. The quiet, private family, Eleanor a retired nurse, Rachel a middle school English teacher, became outspoken advocates not just for Jessica, but for missing persons cases nationwide. "We had two choices," Eleanor explained during a 2010 interview. "We could accept that the system had done all it could, or we could become the system Jessica needed. We chose the second option." Their advocacy began simply, maintaining a dedicated phone line for tips, replacing faded posters throughout Bloomington, and meeting monthly with whoever at the police department would still listen. But as they connected with families of other missing persons, their efforts expanded in scope and sophistication. By 2003, Eleanor had completed courses in private investigation techniques through an online program. Though not licensed as an actual PI, she gained valuable skills in interviewing, record-keeping, and evidence collection. She joined national organizations for families of missing persons, attending conferences where experts shared investigation strategies and emotional support. Rachel, meanwhile, leveraged her teaching background to develop educational programs about missing persons cases. She created age-appropriate presentations for local schools, teaching children safety protocols while gently raising awareness about her sister's case. Her classroom experience made her an effective public speaker, and she gradually became the family's media representative. Rachel could make people listen when they'd rather look away, said Margaret Wilson, who founded a support group for families of missing persons after meeting the Mercers. She had this teacher's ability to hold attention, to make Jessica's story matter to strangers. In October 2002, on the second anniversary of Jessica's disappearance, the Mercers organized their first formal remembrance event, a candlelight vigil at the Bloomington Courthouse Square. Approximately 50 people attended, standing silent in the autumn chill as Rachel read a poem she had written for her sister. This became an annual tradition that evolved over the years. By the 5th anniversary, the vigil had expanded to include an awareness walk through downtown Bloomington. By the 10th, it featured speakers from law enforcement and victim advocacy groups, drawing attendees from throughout Indiana and garnering regional media coverage. The anniversaries were always the hardest days, Eleanor confided. But transforming our pain into public action gave those days purpose. We weren't just remembering Jessica. We were fighting for her. Perhaps most impactful was the Mercers' creation of Jessica's Day at local elementary schools, held each May near Jessica's birthday. What began as simple presentations about personal safety evolved into a curriculum about community caring, featuring art projects and writing exercises that elementary-aged children could understand without being frightened. The program spread to schools throughout Monroe County, ensuring that even as years passed, new generations of Bloomington residents knew Jessica's name and story. Lily, growing up in this environment of advocacy, joined her grandmother and aunt at events as soon as she was old enough to understand their purpose. By her teenage years, she had become a powerful speaker in her own right, her presence a stark reminder of all Jessica had lost. "I have no memories of my mother," Lily stated during the 15th anniversary vigil, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "Everything I know about her comes from stories, from photographs, from the ways my grandmother and aunt have kept her alive for me. I'm not just searching for answers about what happened. I'm searching for the pieces of myself that disappeared with her." The Mercers' private investigation efforts ran parallel to their public advocacy. Having exhausted official channels, they turned to alternatives that law enforcement either couldn't pursue or had abandoned as unproductive. In 2004, they hired their first private investigator, a retired Indianapolis detective who specialized in cold cases. Though his 3-month investigation yielded no breakthroughs, he helped reorganize their case files and identified several witnesses who hadn't been thoroughly interviewed during the initial investigation. 2 years later, when a true crime television series expressed interest in featuring Jessica's case, the Mercers leveraged the opportunity to fund another private investigation. This time, they worked with a team that included a forensic psychologist who developed new theories about Jessica's disappearance based on offender profiling techniques that hadn't been applied previously. "The private investigations gave us direction when we felt lost," Rachel explained. "Even when they didn't produce answers, they gave us new questions to ask, new paths to explore." Eleanor's war room expanded with each investigation, its walls covered with timelines, photographs, and maps dotted with colored pins representing possible sightings, search areas, and places of interest. What had begun as a grieving mother's desperate collection became a sophisticated case file that impressed even veteran investigators. "What time is it where you're watching?" This family spent countless sleepless nights searching for answers, reviewing files by lamplight when most of the world was sleeping. Their determination measured not in hours but in years of relentless pursuit. Community support for the Mercers evolved over the decades. While the crowds at early vigils represented those who remembered Jessica personally, later gatherings increasingly drew people with no direct connection to the case. Individuals moved by the family's persistence or with personal connections to other missing persons cases. Local businesses that had initially donated resources because they knew Jessica gradually transitioned to supporting the cause because they knew Eleanor and Rachel. The owner of Bloomington print shop, who had provided free posters in 2000, continued the practice even after retiring, training his successor to maintain the commitment. The local coffee shop where the Mercers held monthly Justice for Jessica meetups reserved their table with a small placard year-round. New generations of Bloomington police officers, some of whom had been children when Jessica disappeared, learned about her case during training. Though official resources remained limited, individual officers often spent off-duty hours reviewing case files or following up on tips that came through the Mercers hotline. This community never completely forgot, Eleanor said on the 20th anniversary in 2020. People moved away, new people moved in, businesses changed hands, but somehow Jessica remained a part of Bloomington's consciousness. Not at the forefront perhaps, but never entirely gone. The Mercers' unwavering commitment exacted a heavy personal toll. Eleanor's health suffered from the stress of raising Lily while maintaining the investigation. Rachel delayed marriage and starting her own family, unwilling to divide her limited time and emotional resources. Both women experienced the complicated grief that comes with ambiguous loss, unable to find closure without knowing Jessica's fate. Yet they persisted, year after year, anniversary after anniversary, converting their private anguish into public purpose and refusing to let Jessica's case become just another folder in a dusty archive of unsolved mysteries. The dawn of the 21st century ushered in a forensic revolution that transformed criminal investigations worldwide. What seemed like science fiction in 2000 became standard procedure by 2025. DNA analysis, once requiring samples the size of a quarter, could now be performed on specimens invisible to the naked eye. Digital forensics evolved from basic file recovery to sophisticated algorithms capable of reconstructing deleted data across multiple platforms. Cellular technology advanced from triangulating general locations to pinpointing positions within meters. These technological leaps repeatedly demonstrated a powerful truth. No evidence truly disappears. It simply waits for the right technology to reveal it. For cold cases like Jessica Mercer's, this revolution offered renewed hope. Across the country, investigations dormant for decades sparked back to life as evidence preserved in storage rooms yielded secrets to methods that hadn't existed when the crimes occurred. What makes cold cases solvable today isn't necessarily new evidence, explained Dr. Amelia Richardson, director of the Midwest Forensic Science Center. It's new eyes seeing old evidence through the lens of new technology. The clues were always there. We just couldn't read them before. In January 2025, the Bloomington Police Department launched a systematic review of unsolved cases as part of a statewide cold case initiative, funded by a federal grant. A specialized team including veteran detectives, forensic technicians, and digital analysis experts began methodically revisiting cases that had gone cold, despite substantial evidence. Jessica Mercer's disappearance, which had remained officially active but practically dormant, became one of the first files they examined. Detective Marcus Washington, who led the cold case unit, had personal reasons for prioritizing Jessica's case. As a rookie officer in 2000, he had been among the first responders searching wooded areas around Bloomington in the days after she vanished. Now, approaching retirement, he saw an opportunity to resolve the case that had haunted his entire career. "I remember Eleanor and Rachel Mercer walking those search lines alongside us," Washington recalled. 25 years later, they're still searching. If technology could give them answers now, I wanted to make that happen. The cold case team began by digitizing the entire case file. Thousands of pages of interviews, reports, and leads accumulated over 25 years. Using advanced text analysis software, they identified patterns and contradictions that human reviewers might have missed across such a vast collection of documents. The system flagged several witness statements containing timeline inconsistencies and highlighted connections between individuals interviewed that hadn't been fully explored. Simultaneously, they re-examined the limited physical evidence preserved from the original investigation. Items from Jessica's apartment, hairbrushes, toothbrushes, clothing, had been collected but never processed using modern techniques. The team submitted these for advanced DNA extraction, creating a complete genetic profile of Jessica that could be compared against unidentified remains nationwide. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a seemingly insignificant detail in the original case file that modern technology transformed from footnote to focal point. During the initial investigation in 2000, detectives had collected security camera footage from businesses along Jessica's likely route home from the diner. Most of these recordings yielded nothing useful, grainy images too indistinct to identify vehicles or individuals. One particular tape from a gas station 2 blocks from Mabel's diner had been noted as reviewed, no relevant content, and filed away. Using artificial intelligence-enhanced video restoration, technology developed for astronomical imagery that could extract detail from visual noise, forensic technicians reprocessed all available footage. The gas station video, nearly unwatchable in its original form, revealed something extraordinary when enhanced. "I remember the exact moment," said Eliza Kimura, the forensic video specialist who made the discovery. "I'd been staring at enhanced frames for hours when suddenly, there it was, something everyone had missed for 25 years. In the corner of the frame, barely visible for less than 3 seconds, appeared a partial reflection in the gas station window. The reflection showed a blue vehicle that matched the description of Jessica's Honda Civic pulling into the far edge of the lot at 12:22 a.m., 16 minutes after she left work. More importantly, the enhanced footage revealed a second vehicle pulling in directly behind hers, a dark-colored SUV that hadn't appeared in any previous investigation reports. This 16-minute gap became the focus of intense scrutiny. The diner where Jessica worked was only a 5-minute drive from the gas station. What had caused the delay? Why had she stopped there when her usual route home didn't pass this location? Had she been followed from the diner, or had she gone there to meet someone? The team's digital forensics experts turned to Jessica's phone records, applying modern analytical tools to the raw data preserved in the original case file. In 2000, investigators had noted the 10:31 p.m. call from Michael Lawson, but technology at that time couldn't extract the detailed metadata now available from cellular communications. Reanalysis revealed something the original investigation had missed. Jessica had received a text message at 12:15 a.m., 9 minutes after leaving work. Text messaging was relatively new in 2000, and investigators hadn't thoroughly examined this communication channel. The content of the message was unrecoverable, but the sending number remained in the records. That number belonged to a prepaid phone purchased with cash from a convenience store in Indianapolis, a store located less than half a mile from the hotel where Dustin Harmon had stayed during his literature conference. "This created our first solid timeline alteration," Detective Washington explained. "We now believed Jessica received a text that prompted her to deviate from her usual route home, directing her to the gas station where she encountered someone in the dark SUV. The team then applied Geographic Information System, GIS mapping, a technology in its infancy in 2000, but now sophisticated enough to integrate cellular data, surveillance footage timestamps, and physical locations into a comprehensive visualization of movement patterns. This revealed that Jessica's phone had remained active until 1:07 a.m., traveling approximately 22 miles northwest of Bloomington before signal was lost. This location, a remote area near Cataract Lake, had never been searched during the original investigation because no data had pointed investigators in that direction. The most dramatic technological application came when the team revisited Dustin Harmon's seemingly unbreakable alibi. Hotel security footage from 2000 had shown him entering his room at 11:37 p.m. and not leaving until morning. But modern facial recognition software, combined with gait analysis, detected something human observers had missed. The person who returned to the hotel at 8:15 a.m. walked differently than the person who had entered the night before, despite wearing identical clothing. The difference was subtle, a slightly different weight distribution, A marginally different arm swing, explained Dr. Tariq Nazir, the biometric specialist who analyzed the footage. But humans have distinctive movement patterns as unique as fingerprints. Our analysis indicated a 97.3% probability that these were different individuals. This revelation suggested an elaborate deception. Someone else wearing Harmon's clothes had checked into his hotel room while Harmon himself went elsewhere, returning before morning to maintain the appearance of having never left. Armed with these findings, investigators secured search warrants for properties connected to Dustin Harmon, including a lakeside cabin inherited from his grandfather in 2003. The cabin, located near where Jessica's phone had last pinged, had never been mentioned in his original interviews. The search of this property would yield the evidence that finally answered questions that had haunted Bloomington for 25 years. Incredible breakthroughs like these happen more often than you might think in the world of cold case investigations. If you're fascinated by how modern technology is solving decades-old mysteries, tap that subscribe button right now. Our channel regularly features updates on cases just like Jessica's, where cutting-edge science brings justice after years of uncertainty. Don't miss a single development in this case or others like it. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to be part of the community that never gives up on finding truth, no matter how long it takes. The search warrant for Dustin Harmon's lakeside cabin was executed at dawn on March 17, 2025. Detective Marcus Washington led a team of 8 officers and forensic specialists down the gravel road that wound through dense woodland to the isolated property. The modest A-frame structure, weathered by Indiana seasons, sat on 3 acres overlooking a secluded cove of Cataract Lake, just 2 miles from where Jessica's phone had last pinged 25 years earlier. "We knew this might be our only chance," Washington later recalled. "If we found nothing, the case might never be solved." The cabin appeared well-maintained but rarely used. A thin layer of dust covered furniture, and the refrigerator contained only condiments and non-perishables. What caught investigators' attention immediately was the structure's unusual foundation, raised unusually high off the ground with a crawl space that seemed recently disturbed. "The soil around one section of the foundation looked different," explained forensic technician Maya Rodriguez. Subtle differences in coloration and compaction suggested this area had been excavated and refilled, potentially within the past few decades. Ground-penetrating radar, technology unavailable to local departments in 2000, revealed an anomaly beneath the structure approximately 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. Excavation of this area uncovered a metal storage container, sealed and buried approximately 4 feet below ground level. Inside the container, preserved from environmental deterioration, investigators found what they had sought for 25 years: Jessica Mercer's driver's license, wallet, and car keys. Alongside these personal items were plastic zip ties, duct tape, and a section of fabric that DNA analysis would later confirm contained Jessica's blood. Most damning of all was a journal written in Dustin Harmon's distinctive handwriting, detailing his meticulous planning and execution of what he called the perfect erasure. The journal described how he had cultivated an academic colleague to serve as his unwitting alibi by checking into the hotel wearing Harmon's clothes, how he had purchased a prepaid phone to lure Jessica to the gas station, and how he had followed her for weeks to establish her routines. The journal was both a confession and a literary exercise for him, Washington explained. He wrote about Jessica's disappearance as if it were a novel he was crafting, referring to himself in the third person as the professor, and Jessica as the character who needed to be written out of the narrative. Forensic analysis of the container and its contents provided irrefutable evidence. Modern touch DNA techniques recovered Harmon's genetic material from beneath the container's handles and from the journal's pages. The blood evidence matched Jessica's DNA profile created from her preserved personal effects. Perhaps most shocking was the discovery of a hidden compartment in the cabin's bedroom closet. Behind a false panel, investigators found hundreds of newspaper clippings about Jessica's disappearance, photographs of Eleanor and Rachel Mercer at various search events over the years, and even school pictures of Lily as she grew up. Images apparently taken surreptitiously at public events. He had been watching them. Washington said, his voice tight with controlled anger. For 25 years he had been observing their suffering as if it were some kind of theatrical performance staged for his benefit. The collected evidence revealed a profile that stunned even veteran investigators. Dustin Harmon emerged not as a jealous ex-husband who had committed a crime of passion, but as a calculating predator who had eliminated Jessica when she threatened his carefully constructed image. The journal entries revealed that Jessica had discovered Harmon's inappropriate relationships with several of his female students. Relationships that would have destroyed his academic career, if reported. When she confronted him and threatened to inform university authorities unless he relinquished all claims to custody of Lily, he began planning what he described as her literary ending. Perhaps most disturbing was the unexpected connection that emerged between Harmon and the broader community. Throughout the 25 years since Jessica's disappearance, he had been an active member of Bloomington's cultural scene, serving on the board of the local library foundation, teaching creative writing workshops, and even, in a twist of breathtaking audacity, participating in a panel discussion about unsolved mysteries in literature at the 20th anniversary of Jessica's disappearance. He wasn't hiding in the shadows, explained Dr. Elaine Morrison, a forensic psychologist who reviewed the case. He was hiding in plain sight, incorporating his crime into his persona as an intellectual fascinated by mysteries and untold stories. He derived satisfaction not just from having committed what he considered the perfect crime, but from watching the community's ongoing response to it. With evidence securely documented and analyzed, the arrest preparation began. The prosecution team, led by veteran District Attorney Rebecca Torres, worked meticulously to ensure the case would be airtight. They knew that after 25 years, any procedural errors could jeopardize their chance for justice. "We approach this like an archaeological excavation," Torres explained. "Every piece of evidence, every statement, every legal document had to be handled with extraordinary care. We had one chance to get this right." While physical evidence was processed, a surveillance team monitored Harmon's movements. Now 58, he had recently taken early retirement from Indiana University and was preparing for a visiting professorship at Oxford University that would have taken him out of the country within weeks. The timing was critical, Washington noted. We needed to ensure he couldn't flee once he realized we were closing in. On April 3, 2025, at precisely 7:15 a.m., Dustin Harmon opened his front door to retrieve the morning newspaper, a ritual he maintained despite the digital age, preferring physical papers for what he called their tactile authenticity. Instead of his newspaper, he found Detective Washington and 4 officers on his doorstep. "Dr. Harmon," Washington said, "I'm here to place you under arrest for the murder of Jessica Mercer." Witnesses described how Harmon's expression shifted from confusion to calculation in the span of seconds. He straightened his posture, adjusted the reading glasses hanging from a cord around his neck, and said with remarkable composure, "I believe you've made a rather dramatic error, Detective." "We found the container, Dr. Harmon," Washington replied. "We found the journal." According to the arresting officers, Harmon's academic facade cracked momentarily, his eyes widening, his breathing accelerating. Then, as if accessing a reserve of self-control, he collected himself and asked, "May I change into more appropriate attire before we depart?" "No, sir," Washington answered, producing handcuffs. "You've kept people waiting for 25 years. They won't wait any longer." As Harmon was led to the police car in his bathrobe and slippers, neighbors emerged from surrounding houses, watching in stunned silence as one of Bloomington's most respected academics was taken into custody for a murder that had haunted the community for a generation. News of the arrest spread through Bloomington with astonishing speed. By noon, crowds had gathered outside the police station, many holding candles despite the daylight, others carrying photographs of Jessica. Eleanor and Rachel Mercer, notified before the arrest, arrived surrounded by supporters who had formed a protective circle around them for decades. 29-year-old Lily, now a nurse practitioner living in Indianapolis, joined them later that afternoon, her face bearing the unmistakable resemblance to the mother she had never known. "I always imagined this moment would bring relief," Rachel told reporters gathered outside the station. "Instead, it feels like reopening a wound we've been trying to heal for 25 years. The community reaction reflected the complex emotions of a town forced to reckon with deception in their midst. Former students of Harmon expressed shock and betrayal. Colleagues who had provided his alibi during the original investigation questioned how they had been manipulated. Parents who had trusted him with their children at writing workshops revisited those interactions with new perspective. Perhaps most profoundly affected were those who had known both Jessica and Dustin, who had attended their wedding, who had sympathized with him after her disappearance, who had watched him construct an identity as the abandoned husband who had moved forward with dignity. "He made us complicit in his narrative," said one former neighbor who had brought meals to Harmon in the weeks after Jessica vanished. "We offered him comfort while he watched Jessica's family suffer, knowing exactly what he had done to her." As Harmon was processed and held without bail, investigators continued searching his properties for the one answer that still eluded them. What had happened to Jessica's body? What had he done with her car? The journal contained no specifics about these final details, suggesting that even in his private confessions Harmon maintained some secrets. If you were an investigator on this case, what detail do you think might have been overlooked all these years? Sometimes the smallest things break the biggest cases. Share your thoughts in the comments. Investigators tell us that fresh perspectives can sometimes reveal angles they never considered. As news of the arrest dominated headlines across the Midwest, another story emerged alongside it: the extraordinary persistence of two women who had refused to let Jessica be forgotten. Eleanor and Rachel Mercer had maintained pressure on authorities for 25 years, had preserved evidence, had continued speaking Jessica's name when others had moved on. Without the Mercer family, this case would have remained unsolved. Detective Washington acknowledged. They kept Jessica present in this community when the system failed her. They deserve as much credit for this arrest as any technological advancement. As Bloomington residents placed flowers at impromptu memorials throughout the city, the community began the difficult process of reconciling the respected academic they thought they knew with the calculating killer now revealed. The arrest brought answers, but also questions about how well we truly know those among us, about the masks people wear and the secrets they keep. For Eleanor, Rachel, and Lily Mercer, the arrest marked not an ending, but a transition, from searching for a killer to searching for Jessica herself, from fighting for investigation to fighting for justice in a courtroom, from wondering who to wondering where. The mystery that had dominated their lives for 25 years had partially unraveled, but the most sacred question remained unanswered. Where was Jessica, and could she finally be brought home? In the months following Dustin Harmon's arrest, the justice system began its methodical process. The Monroe County Prosecutor's Office assembled a formidable case, combining physical evidence recovered from the cabin with the damning journal entries and forensic analysis that dismantled Harmon's 25-year alibi. The grand jury indictment, delivered in June 2025, charged Harmon with first-degree murder, kidnapping, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. Despite the passage of time, Indiana has no statute of limitations for murder, allowing prosecutors to pursue the case as if it had occurred yesterday rather than a generation ago. Harmon's defense strategy pivoted rapidly from initial claims of innocence to a focus on procedural challenges. His attorneys, a high-powered team from Indianapolis, filed motions questioning the search warrant validity and challenging the admissibility of the journal as evidence. Each motion was systematically denied by Judge Caroline Reeves, who had overseen numerous high-profile cases throughout her career. The prosecution has an unusually strong case for one of this age, explained legal analyst Martin Schaffer. Most cold cases that reach trial rely heavily on circumstantial evidence. Here, they have what amounts to a confession, physical evidence linking the suspect to the victim, and documentation of premeditation. As of September 2025, Harmon remains in custody awaiting trial, scheduled for November. Prosecutors have announced they will seek life imprisonment without possibility of parole. The justice system that once seemed to have failed Jessica Mercer now moves inexorably toward resolution. Yet one crucial question remains unanswered. Where is Jessica's body? Despite extensive searches of properties connected to Harmon, including underwater explorations of Cataract Lake, investigators have not located her remains or her vehicle. Harmon maintains silence on this matter, refusing to provide information even when offered consideration during sentencing. Some killers retain these final secrets as their last exercise of control, Detective Washington observed. After 25 years of watching the family suffer, he's unwilling to surrender the one piece of information that might bring them peace. For Eleanor and Rachel Mercer, the arrest brought complicated emotions. The vindication of their decades-long insistence that Jessica hadn't simply abandoned her life was overshadowed by the horrific details of Harmon's calculated planning and his years of watching their suffering with apparent fascination. Finding out it was Dustin all along, someone who sat across from us at holiday dinners, who held Lily as a baby, that's a betrayal beyond words, Rachel explained during a press conference after the arrest. We suspected him initially, but his alibi seemed so solid. To learn he manipulated an entire community, that he built his career while secretly reveling in our pain. There's no preparing for that revelation. Eleanor, now 78, expressed a more straightforward response. I kept my promise to Jessica. I always told her I'd protect Lily, and I did. I told her I'd never stop looking, and I didn't. Now I have one promise left to keep. Finding where he put her, so we can bring her home. Lily Mercer Davidson, who has built a life and medical career despite growing up in the shadow of tragedy, addressed the public in her own statement. I've lived my entire life with a mother-shaped absence. Finding her remains won't fill that void, but it would transform an endless question into a place where I could finally say goodbye. The arrest and impending trial have sparked renewed interest in similar cold cases nationwide. Law enforcement agencies across the country have initiated reviews of their own unsolved disappearances, particularly those with seemingly solid alibis that modern technology might dismantle. The Indiana State Police announced a new cold case review initiative, allocating resources specifically for applying current forensic techniques to long-dormant investigations. Several universities have established programs partnering forensic science students with law enforcement to provide fresh analysis of preserved evidence. The Mercer case demonstrates that unsolvable cases often simply await the right technological tools, explained Dr. Richardson of the Midwest Forensic Science Center. Evidence that couldn't speak in 2000 found its voice in 2025. Beyond technological advances, investigators point to crucial lessons about the human elements that keep cold cases alive. The relationship between the Mercer family and law enforcement, particularly Detective Washington's willingness to prioritize a case that had haunted his entire career, illustrates how persistence on both sides of the badge can eventually yield results. Cold cases require advocates, Washington stated. They need someone who refuses to let the file gather dust, who keeps asking questions even when answers seem impossible. Eleanor and Rachel Mercer never stopped being Jessica's advocates, and that made all the difference. In August 2025, the city of Bloomington unveiled a memorial garden dedicated to Jessica Mercer and other victims of unsolved crimes. Located in a quiet corner of People's Park, the garden features a bronze sculpture of an empty chair, symbolizing both absence and continued presence in the community's memory. The university where Harmon taught for decades has established the Jessica Mercer Scholarship for single parents pursuing education, a gesture of atonement for the years they unknowingly harbored her killer within their faculty. Most meaningful to the Mercer family was the creation of the Jessica Mercer Cold Case Foundation, an organization providing resources to families navigating the complex emotional and practical challenges of long-term missing persons cases. Funded initially by donations that poured in after Harmon's arrest, the foundation now supports families across the Midwest. As this case moves toward its judicial conclusion, we're reminded that justice, while sometimes delayed, can still arrive even after decades of darkness. If Jessica's story has moved you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support enables us to continue bringing attention to cases like hers, cases that might otherwise be forgotten but deserve to be told. Share this video with someone who appreciates the importance of persistence in the face of seemingly impossible odds. Leave a comment about what aspect of this case impacted you most deeply. Building this community of viewers who care about cold case justice creates awareness that can make a real difference for families still waiting for answers. In our next episode, we'll examine another case that defied solution for decades. The mysterious disappearance of 3 hikers from a national park in 1987, and how a forgotten roll of film developed 30 years later finally revealed what happened on the mountain that day. Subscribe now so you don't miss this extraordinary story of wilderness, survival, and unexpected evidence that finally brought answers to families who had given up hope. Some mysteries aren't meant to remain unsolved forever. They simply wait for the right combination of technology, determination, and courage to bring truth into the light.